The winter sun was dying behind the mountains when Eleanor Hayes spotted the wolves. 3 dark shapes moved across the white wilderness of Black Pine Ridge, their shadows stretching over the snow-covered ground like silent ghosts. The wind howled through the towering pines, carrying loose flakes across the narrow trail that wound toward Eleanor's cabin. She tightened her grip on the reins of her mare. The storm that had battered the Wyoming Territory for 2 days had finally passed, but the cold remained merciless. Every breath felt sharp enough to cut the lungs. Most sensible people would have stayed indoors. But Eleanor had never been known for doing only what was sensible. She had spent the afternoon delivering books to a distant ranch family whose children attended her small schoolhouse. Now she was returning home alone, with darkness creeping across the mountains. The wolves suddenly stopped. All 3 stared toward something hidden among the drifts. Eleanor frowned. Animals rarely behaved that way unless they had found prey. Or a body. Her mare snorted nervously. "Easy, Daisy," Eleanor whispered. She should continue riding. That would be the smart choice. Black Pine Ridge was famous for dangerous travelers, outlaws, and desperate men seeking refuge in the wilderness. A lone widow had no business investigating strange discoveries after sunset. Yet something tugged at her conscience. She nudged the horse forward. The wolves backed away reluctantly. Then Eleanor saw him. A man lay half buried beneath a blanket of snow. For a moment she thought he was dead. His coat was torn. One boot was missing. Blood stained the snow beneath his shoulder. His face was pale beneath several days' worth of dark stubble. The wolves had been waiting patiently for nature to finish its work. Eleanor dismounted immediately. "Oh Lord!" She hurried through the snow and knelt beside him. His skin felt ice cold. A deep wound marked his left shoulder. Another injury twisted his leg at an unnatural angle. Whoever he was, he had been through hell. As she pulled back part of his coat, something slipped from an inner pocket. A folded paper. Eleanor unfolded it. Her stomach tightened. The paper contained a sketch of the wounded man's face. Wanted. Rowan Blackwolf. Reward, $500. Armed and dangerous. Wanted for murder. Eleanor stared at the poster. Everyone in the territory had heard the name. Townsfolk spoke of Rowan Blackwolf in hushed voices. Some called him an outlaw. Others called him a killer. The newspapers described him as one of the most wanted men in Wyoming. Slowly Eleanor looked back down at the unconscious stranger. This was him. The fugitive. The man everyone feared. She should leave. She knew that. The sheriff would pay handsomely for information. $500 could repair her roof, buy livestock, and secure her future for years. Yet as she studied Rowan's face, something felt wrong. Murderers were supposed to look monstrous. Dangerous. Cruel. This man looked exhausted. Broken. Abandoned. Almost as though someone had already condemned him before the world had learned the truth. A weak sound escaped his lips. His eyes fluttered open. For one brief moment their gazes met. Pain. Fear. Determination. Eleanor saw all 3. Then his eyes closed again. That single look shattered her resolve. "No," she whispered. "I'm not leaving you here." The decision was made. She slipped the wanted poster into her pocket. Then began the difficult task of saving a man everyone else wanted captured. The journey back to her cabin took nearly an hour. Twice Rowan nearly slipped from the horse. 3 times Eleanor feared he had stopped breathing. By the time they reached Black Pine Ridge cabin, darkness had completely swallowed the mountains. A lantern glowed inside the small log home. Its warm light spilled across the snow. To Eleanor it had never looked more welcoming. She somehow managed to drag Rowan inside. The cabin consisted of only one room. A stone fireplace. A wooden table. A bed. Several shelves packed with books and medical supplies. It wasn't much. But tonight it would become a hospital. Eleanor immediately set water to boil. Years ago, before marriage and tragedy had changed her life, she had trained as a nurse in St. Louis. The skills had never left her. As she cut away Rowan's damaged coat, she discovered the full extent of his injuries. The gunshot wound was serious. Very serious. The bullet appeared lodged near his shoulder blade. His leg was fractured. His body burned with fever. Without treatment he would be dead by morning. Eleanor rolled up her sleeves. "Let's see if we can prove fate wrong." Hours passed. Outside, the wind screamed through the pines. Inside, Eleanor worked beneath lantern light. She cleaned the wound. Disinfected her instruments. Prepared herself for surgery. Rowan drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point his eyes opened. "You should leave," he muttered weakly. Eleanor barely glanced up. You're in no position to give instructions. His lips twitched slightly. Perhaps a smile. Perhaps simply pain. The procedure was brutal. When Eleanor finally located the bullet, relief nearly overwhelmed her. Carefully she extracted the metal fragment. Blood flowed. She stitched the wound, bandaged it, then collapsed into a chair, exhausted. The bullet sat on the table beside her. Proof that death had nearly claimed another victim. The fire crackled softly. Rowan slept. For now he was alive. That would have to be enough. Near midnight, Eleanor found herself unable to sleep. Instead she sat beside the bed, studying her patient. Were you really? The question lingered in her thoughts. The newspapers claimed he was a murderer. But newspapers had been wrong before. Her late husband, Daniel, used to say that truth often arrived long after judgment. The memory tightened her chest. Daniel had been dead for nearly 2 years. Pneumonia. Fast. Merciless. Nothing Eleanor did could save him. Since then, loneliness had become her constant companion. Perhaps that was why she couldn't abandon wounded strangers. She knew too well what loss felt like. A sudden groan pulled her from her thoughts. Rowan stirred. His eyes opened slowly. This time they remained open. He studied the unfamiliar cabin. The fireplace. The books. The woman sitting beside him. Confusion clouded his face. Where am I? Black Pine Ridge. His voice cracked. You saved me? Apparently. Silence settled between them. Finally Rowan looked away. You shouldn't have. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. That seems to be everyone's opinion lately. A faint laugh escaped him. It quickly turned into a cough. Pain flashed across his features. People will come looking for me. I'm aware. You know who I am? Eleanor pulled the wanted poster from her pocket and placed it on the table. Rowan stared at it. Then closed his eyes. I see. For a long moment neither spoke. The wind rattled the cabin walls. Finally Eleanor folded the poster. I don't care what the papers say. His eyes opened again. Surprise flickered there. Why? She considered the question carefully, then answered honestly. Because I've met newspapers before. For the first time, Rowan looked at her with something other than suspicion. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps gratitude. Perhaps both. The following morning dawned gray and bitterly cold. Snow covered everything. Eleanor stepped outside carrying a bucket. The world appeared peaceful. Too peaceful. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Distant. Growing louder. Her heart immediately sank. Riders. Several of them. Moving toward the cabin. Eleanor climbed the porch steps quickly and peered through the trees. 3 mounted figures emerged from the snow. Deputies. And leading them was a familiar face. Sheriff Caleb Mercer. The law had arrived. And they were searching for the most wanted man in Wyoming. Inside the cabin, Rowan heard the approaching horses too. Their eyes met. Neither needed to speak. Trouble had finally found Black Pine Ridge. And it was standing right outside the door. The pounding knock rattled the cabin door. Eleanor Hayes froze. Across the room, Rowan Blackwolf struggled to sit upright on the bed. His face tightened with pain as he reached instinctively toward the rifle resting against the wall. No, Eleanor whispered sharply. The knock came again. Harder this time. Mrs. Hayes? A voice called from outside. Open up. Sheriff Caleb Mercer. Eleanor's pulse thundered in her ears. The sheriff rarely visited Black Pine Ridge unless something was seriously wrong. And today he was looking for the man hidden inside her cabin. Rowan slowly swung his legs over the edge of the bed. His face had regained some color during the past day, but he was nowhere near strong enough to fight. If Mercer found him now, everything would be over. Eleanor's mind raced. Then she remembered something. The storage chamber. Years ago, miners had used the cabin before she purchased it. Beneath the floorboards was a narrow underground compartment once used for storing supplies during harsh winters. Almost no one knew it existed. Can you stand? She whispered. Rowan clenched his jaw. I'll manage. The knock echoed again. Mrs. Hayes. I'm coming. Eleanor shouted. She hurried to a faded rug near the fireplace and pulled it aside. Beneath it lay a hidden wooden hatch. Rowan's eyes widened. Get down there. He hesitated. If they catch you helping me? They won't. Another knock interrupted him. Hurry. Together they lifted the hatch. Cold air drifted upward from the darkness below. The chamber was cramped and dusty, barely large enough for a grown man. Rowan lowered himself carefully. Pain flashed across his face as his injured shoulder brushed the ladder. Eleanor handed him a blanket. No matter what happens, she whispered, don't make a sound. Their eyes met. For a brief moment she saw gratitude there. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Eleanor closed the hatch, covered it with the rug, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Sheriff Caleb Mercer stood on the porch surrounded by 2 deputies. Snowflakes swirled around them. The sheriff removed his hat politely. Morning, Mrs. Hayes. Eleanor forced a smile. Sheriff. Mercer's sharp gray eyes studied her carefully. We're searching for a fugitive. I heard. Rowan Blackwolf. Eleanor folded her arms. The outlaw. That's the one. Mercer glanced past her into the cabin. Mind if we look around? Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. But refusal would only create suspicion. Of course not. The sheriff stepped inside. The deputies followed. Eleanor felt sweat gathering beneath her collar despite the cold. Mercer examined the room methodically. The bed, the shelves, the fireplace, the table, everything. One deputy wandered toward the rug covering the hatch. Eleanor's stomach twisted. The man paused, looked down. Then suddenly another deputy called from outside. Sheriff, we found tracks. Mercer immediately turned. What kind of tracks? Horse tracks heading north. The sheriff strode toward the door. The deputy near the hatch followed. Eleanor silently thanked every saint she could remember. Mercer stopped at the doorway. If you see Blackwolf, report it immediately. I will. The sheriff studied her face one final time, then nodded. Moments later the riders disappeared into the forest. Only after the hoofbeats faded did Eleanor allow herself to breathe. She rushed to the hatch, opened it. Rowan looked up from the darkness. You lied to a sheriff. I noticed. A faint smile touched his lips. It was the first genuine smile she had seen. Over the following days, winter tightened its grip on Black Pine Ridge. Heavy snow buried the trails. Ice coated the trees. And Rowan slowly recovered. His fever broke. The wound began healing. The swelling in his shoulder decreased. For the first time since arriving, he could walk short distances without assistance. Yet despite the physical improvement, another problem remained. Neither Eleanor nor Rowan fully trusted one another. Not yet. One evening, while snow fell outside the cabin windows, Eleanor placed a bowl of stew on the table. Rowan sat opposite her. The fire crackled softly. For several minutes they ate in silence. Then Eleanor finally asked the question that had haunted her since finding the wanted poster. Did you kill anyone? Rowan stopped eating. The room grew quiet. Finally he looked up. No. The answer came without hesitation. Eleanor studied him carefully. Most liars avoided eye contact. Rowan didn't. The posters say murder. The posters lie. Then tell me the truth. For a long moment Rowan stared into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded tired. I worked security for the Silver Creek Mining Company. Eleanor recognized the name immediately. The company owned several profitable mines throughout the territory. Powerful people. Wealthy people. Dangerous people. Rowan continued. Last year I discovered something. What? They were using forced labor. Eleanor frowned. What do you mean? Migrant workers. Men who couldn't fight back. They were beaten, starved, and locked underground. A chill ran through her. Good Lord. I gathered evidence. His expression hardened. Names? Documents? Witnesses? What happened? They found out. The fire snapped loudly. They killed the men who helped me. Eleanor felt sick. Rowan's gaze drifted toward the window. Then they blamed everything on me. Silence filled the cabin. Outside, wind swept through the pine trees. Inside, Eleanor realized something important. The man sitting across from her wasn't an outlaw. He was a hunted witness. A man carrying secrets powerful people wanted buried. No wonder they're chasing you, she whispered. Rowan laughed bitterly. Now you understand. Days passed. Slowly trust began replacing suspicion. They shared stories. Eleanor spoke of her husband Daniel. How disease had taken him. How loneliness had followed. Rowan shared memories of growing up in the mountains. Of fishing in frozen rivers. Of learning to track animals through deep snow. For the first time in years, Eleanor found herself laughing. Actually laughing. The realization startled her. She had forgotten what that felt like. One night she caught Rowan smiling as she spoke. What? He shook his head. You laugh differently now. Eleanor blinked. Differently than what? Than when I first arrived. Something warm stirred inside her. Before she could answer, a distant sound shattered the moment. Hoofbeats. Fast. Several riders. Both froze. The riders weren't approaching from town. They were coming from the mountains. And they weren't slowing down. Rowan moved to the window. His expression darkened immediately. Eleanor. What is it? His voice became grim. Those aren't deputies. She joined him. 5 armed riders emerged from the snow-covered forest. Black coats. Repeating rifles. Hard faces. Rowan cursed quietly. Who are they? Hired gunmen. A knot formed in Eleanor's stomach. From the mining company? He nodded. They found me. The riders stopped outside the cabin. One man dismounted. Unlike Sheriff Mercer, this stranger carried himself with cold confidence. A predator who knew exactly what he was hunting. He walked to the porch, then knocked. What? Slowly. Deliberately. The sound echoed through the cabin. Rowan's face turned pale. They won't arrest me. Eleanor looked at him. What will they do? His answer came quietly. They'll make sure I never talk. The knock came again. Harder this time. The leader's voice drifted through the door. Mr. Blackwolf. Eleanor's blood ran cold. We know you're inside. The cabin fell silent. Outside, 5 armed men waited. Inside, a wounded fugitive and a lonely schoolteacher faced a choice that would change both their lives forever. And for the first time since finding Rowan in the snow, Eleanor realized something terrifying. The greatest danger had never been the sheriff. It was the men standing outside her door. The knock echoed through the cabin. Eleanor Hayes stood frozen. Across the room, Rowan Blackwolf slowly picked up his rifle. Outside, 5 armed gunmen waited in the snow. The leader knocked again. This time his voice carried through the wooden walls. Mr. Blackwolf. A long pause followed. Then, we know you're in there. The fire crackled softly. No one moved. Finally Rowan spoke. They followed me from Silver Creek. Eleanor swallowed. What do we do? Rowan's expression darkened. If they came all this way, they won't leave empty-handed. The gunmen outside began spreading around the cabin. One moved toward the rear wall. Another headed for the stable. They were preparing for a siege. The leader called out again. We don't want the woman. His tone suggested the exact opposite. Send Blackwolf out and nobody gets hurt. Rowan laughed bitterly. They always say that. Eleanor looked toward the window. Snow swirled across the yard. The forest beyond remained silent. No sheriff. No neighbors. No help. Just them. And 5 killers. The leader's patience finally ended. Last chance. The rifle shot shattered the silence. A bullet smashed through the cabin window. Glass exploded across the floor. Eleanor instinctively ducked. Another shot followed. Then another. The attack had begun. Rowan grabbed her arm. Get down? Bullets hammered the cabin walls. Wood splintered. Smoke drifted through the room. The gunmen were firing from multiple directions. Eleanor crawled behind the heavy table. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might burst. Across the room Rowan fired once. A sharp cry echoed outside. One gunman fell into the snow. The others immediately scattered for cover. For several minutes the battle raged. The cabin shook with every shot. But Rowan's condition quickly became obvious. He was still wounded. Still weak. Still healing. Every movement caused pain. Every shot drained precious strength. Eventually he lowered the rifle. His breathing became ragged. We can't hold them. Eleanor stared at him. Then what? Rowan reached beneath his coat. From inside he removed a leather pouch. The same pouch he had guarded since arriving. He tossed it onto the table. Inside were papers. Documents. Letters. Names. Evidence. Everything. The truth. Eleanor opened one of the documents. Her eyes widened. Payroll records. Witness statements. Signed orders. Proof. Enough proof to destroy Silver Creek Mining Company forever. They've been hunting this, Rowan said. Not me. A loud crash interrupted him. The front door shook violently. The gunmen were trying to break in. Another impact followed. The hinges groaned. Eleanor looked toward Rowan. Fear filled her eyes. What do we do? Rowan stared at the documents. Then toward the snow-covered mountains outside. Finally he made a decision. The sheriff. Eleanor blinked. Mercer. He believes I'm guilty. Exactly. Rowan nodded. He doesn't know the truth. The door shook again. This time part of the frame cracked. They were running out of time. Suddenly, a distant sound drifted through the storm. Hoofbeats. Many hoofbeats. Everyone froze. Even the gunmen outside. The sound grew louder, closer. Then came shouting. Commands. Voices. A whistle. Rowan moved to the shattered window. His eyes widened. Mercer. Eleanor rushed beside him. A dozen riders emerged through the snowfall. Sheriff Caleb Mercer led them. The law had arrived. The gunmen immediately realized their advantage was gone. The leader cursed loudly. Move. Several attempted to retreat toward the trees. Too late. Mercer's deputies surrounded them. Drop your weapons. One gunman fired. Chaos erupted. The final battle began. Shots echoed through Black Pine Ridge. Snow exploded beneath galloping horses. Deputies exchanged fire with the hired killers. Within minutes, 2 gunmen surrendered. Another was wounded. The remaining men attempted to flee. Mercer's riders chased them through the pines. Finally, silence returned. The storm continued falling. But the gunfight was over. Sheriff Mercer dismounted and approached the cabin. His revolver remained drawn. When he entered, he found Rowan standing beside the fireplace. The wanted man made no attempt to run. Mercer's eyes narrowed. So. Rowan calmly placed the leather pouch on the table. You've been hunting the wrong man. The sheriff frowned. What is this? Evidence. Mercer opened the documents. The room fell silent. Page after page. Names. Signatures. Financial records. Witness testimony. The sheriff's expression slowly changed. Confusion. Disbelief. Anger. Then realization. By the time he reached the final document, his face had become pale. Dear God. Eleanor watched quietly. Mercer looked up. Is this real? Rowan nodded. It cost good people their lives. The sheriff turned several pages again. His jaw tightened. Finally he closed the file. The room remained silent. Then Mercer spoke. Not to Rowan, but to Eleanor. How long has he been here? She hesitated. A few weeks. The sheriff sighed heavily. You lied to me. Yes. Mercer looked back toward the evidence. Then surprisingly nodded. I suppose I understand why. For a long moment nobody spoke. At last the sheriff extended a hand toward Rowan. A gesture neither man had expected. I'm sorry. Rowan stared at him. The sheriff continued. I should have looked deeper. Slowly Rowan accepted the handshake. Years of hatred did not disappear instantly. But something changed in that moment. Truth finally had a chance. Spring arrived 3 months later. The snow melted from Black Pine Ridge. Rivers flowed again. Wildflowers pushed through the earth. And news spread across Wyoming Territory. The Silver Creek Mining Company collapsed under investigation. Several executives were arrested. Witnesses stepped forward. The truth emerged. Every charge against Rowan Blackwolf was dismissed. For the first time in nearly 2 years he was a free man. Life gradually returned to normal. Or at least something close to normal. Eleanor reopened her small schoolhouse. Children once again filled the room with laughter. The loneliness that had haunted her for years seemed less heavy now. One bright afternoon she stood outside after class. The mountains glowed beneath the spring sunlight. A gentle breeze moved through the pines. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow. Steady. Approaching from the northern trail. Her heart skipped. She turned. A rider emerged between the trees. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Familiar. Rowan Blackwolf. He guided his horse toward the schoolhouse. This time there was no fear. No pursuit. No wanted posters. Only freedom. Eleanor couldn't stop smiling. Rowan dismounted. For a moment neither spoke. Neither needed to. Finally he held out a small wooden box. I brought you something. Eleanor carefully opened it. Inside rested a silver compass. Beautifully engraved. The needle pointed steadily north. Beneath it lay a folded note. She opened it. The handwriting was rough but unmistakably Rowan's. When everyone else left me for dead, you gave me a future. Eleanor felt tears gather in her eyes. She looked up. Rowan smiled. The same genuine smile she had first seen beneath the cabin floor. I wasn't sure if you'd come back, she admitted. I said I would. The sun slowly lowered behind Black Pine Ridge. Golden light spilled across the mountains. For a while they stood together in comfortable silence. 2 people who had once been strangers. 2 lives changed by a single act of kindness. The future remained uncertain. The frontier always was. But for the first time in many years, neither of them feared what lay ahead. And as the evening light painted the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson, Rowan and Eleanor turned toward the horizon together. Not as a fugitive and a widow. Not as victims of the past. but as two souls beginning a new journey. The last snow of Black Pine Ridge had melted, and at long last spring had arrived.